So when should the podcaster actually sell their own stuff? It's the Podcast Report episode number 55. Show notes, links, conversation, and more at thepodcastreport.com/55.
It's the Podcast Report with Paul Colligan. And here's Paul.
First, the big idea for e-commerce from a podcaster selling something. I mean, it's just a thought. It's a question here. But if they don't like and trust you, why wouldn't they buy something from you? Hey, all, it's Paul Colligan, podcaster, podcasting consultant, author, all sorts of fun stuff. But today, it's all about the Podcast Report. And the Podcast Report is a podcast for podcasters, which I know is a genre, but instead of chatting about microphones and about hosting platforms and these types of things, we take podcasters a little bit deeper, a little bit further. The avatar for this show, you are a podcaster looking to make your podcast a real business or do real business because of your podcast. And gosh darn it, if we're going to chat real business, we need to chat about e-commerce. I've been part of podcasting since the beginning. I love it. I've been it since day one. I've got a few things to tell, learned a few things along the way, and I'm certainly discovering a few things as well. And that's basically what this show is about. The Podcast Report was never designed, was never meant to be a massive play. You'll never see it on a top 100 list or anything like that, but it's a deep one. You who listen to this know it, love it. We've taken you a bit farther, and I'm thrilled to do so. And let's do that in today's episode. A quick update about Patreon. Patreon.com/Paul Colligan. We'll also put a link in the show notes. It's going interesting. I'm going to keep it going. It should be fun. It's going to get a new name after the podcast movement event, but yeah. We're going to keep doing this and take a look if you want. If you're coming to Podcast Movement 2015 and you want to join us for the meetup, definitely get in on the Patreon account. I've got a big announcement coming soon. Sorry, you're not going to get it on this episode, but man, we're going to have some fun. I'll give you a clue. Podcast Movement's definitely part of it. Well, with that said and done, let's get to the topic for today. Why this? Why selling something? Why a podcaster physically selling something from their site, from their podcast? Well, a couple of things. Number one, I'm getting ready for the presentation at Movement about podcast monetization. And well, selling something of your own is definitely part of this. And I think the question of when a podcaster does that and takes that step is an important one. So I thought I would examine it a little bit further. Another item, another element, and I've got a link to this book in the show notes. It's a bit dated, but a book that really influenced me in the early days was a book called The Global Paradox, and by Michael Nesbitt, same guy who did Megatrends and that type of thing. And basically the premise of the global paradox was the larger the world economy, the more important the smallest players. And this idea that the more connected we are, and this was pre-internet, this was pre-podcasting, this was pre-all these things, but the idea that the bigger the world got, the more connected we'd be, and the more important the small players would have. And we wouldn't be confined anymore by a single street or a single city or a single state or even a single country. And I'm seeing that happen in podcasting. I'm seeing that happen in some really interesting ways. So that was a major influence for me. And well, if a podcaster, you have an influence on the world and an audience that's international, why wouldn't you want to expand that and sell something to them? And I don't mean in a, grubby, capitalist, slimy Gordon Gekko kind of way, although I love capitalism and I certainly don't begrudge anyone who's making revenue from this. But simply, if they know, like, and trust you, and you're building this relationship with them that is weekly or monthly or yearly, or in the case of some podcasters, decadely. That's not a term, I just made it up. Why wouldn't you want to sell something to them? Why wouldn't they want to buy something from you? One of my heroes in the podcasting space, Brian Brushwood. Brian is just, not just podcast. That's part of it. He's truly a transmedia, multi-casting type of guy. But, Brian has been running scamstuff.com. And Brian does a show he does a number of shows. Perhaps his most famous one is scamschool.com. And it's a show that teaches you basically how to win free drinks at bar tricks and that kind of stuff and fun little scams. And he has this store, Scam Stuff, that sells products that assists in some of the hijinks and shenanigans that Mr. Brushwood brings on us. And I've got a link to that in the show notes as well. It's a great example of how all this fits together. There is no store that sells the stuff all together the way Brian sells it. And it's a great example. So I've just got, doesn't necessarily have a flow here, isn't necessarily the 7 points or anything like that, but I've sold a lot of stuff online before. I will be selling a lot of things online in the future, and I've got some ideas and some thoughts for you. So number one, obviously, you're going to need a certain amount of volume. If you've got 10 people listening to your show, your goal here is not to sell them something. Your goal is to get 100 people, to get 1,000 people listening to your show. So an e-commerce play, like everything else, is a numbers play. Honestly, I think it might be easier to get a group of 100 people who are willing to buy something from you than a group of thousands of people who only want to listen to ads. But there is something definitely to a certain amount of volume that needs to happen. The second thing is you're going to need something to sell. I don't know if Brian, and maybe I'll get him on a future show to chat about this. I don't know if day one of Scam School, if he realized he's opened up scam stuff, but I think we can learn from him that maybe, we got to get something to sell, and maybe that changes how we build things and how we do things, and realize that sales doesn't just have to be a t-shirt or a CD, and physical does well, but sales can be digital, which is something to look at. And if you ever look at a platform, make sure you find one that does that for you. People are not going to go from a show to a purchase. They're not going to hear that you've got something to sell them, jump over to your website and buy. They're going to go from a show to maybe following you on social, to maybe signing up for your email list, to maybe buying something at one point. Realize that the connection isn't as fast as maybe you'd like it be. There will be those outliers who will jump, but this is a long-term relationship that you build. And it's like I said at the beginning, you got to know, like, and trust you. And that comes over time. Returns. People are going to return stuff. That's what they do. Some are going to, everything from buyer's remorse to they're going to use it and pretend they didn't, to a bunch of things. But returns is part of the game. You got to make that part of the numbers. Digital makes it easier to return because, it makes it easier to return for both sides. It makes it easier to return for them because they can just say, hey, I deleted it, and they don't have to go to the mailbox or anything like that. There's pros and cons to that, obviously, but if you're going to sell stuff, you got to get ready for returns. You got to handle that. Realize that a customer who buys something from you, who physically, gives you their credit card number or sends you a check or something, there's a trust here. There's a trust element here that is tremendous. That will go further. They probably will order again, and things get really, really interesting. Let's run the numbers on this. So I have my How to Podcast book, and I realized a couple of days ago, and that was part of why I wanted to do this episode, that I need to start selling it myself. I've appreciated Amazon selling it. I've had a great time with Amazon selling it, and I will continue to sell it at Amazon. But there are some of you who might want to pick it up from me, and for whatever reason might want to just participate in that way and deal with that way. So let's run the numbers on the book. I can get the books printed for me. And the book's rather long. If you have a shorter book, it's not even going to be this much, but I can have the book for about $3. And, if I sell it for the $14.99, $15 it's sold at Amazon, that's a $12 profit. If I sell 4 of those per 1,000 downloads, 1 out of every 250, then I'm doing better than the average ad insert, and it's a lot more fun. And it's a lot cooler, and it's a lot better, and it adds to my bottom line, and in some ways others didn't. Obviously, with a digital file, once you've set up the system and the hosting's paid for, that kind of thing is free, which brings your market up even more. One thing you want to think about, think up, think whatever in doing all this is the world of print on demand. We've got some really interesting opportunities there. My podcast book at $3 a pop isn't anything special. It's createspace.com. And I've got a link to this in the show notes, thepodcastreport.com, episode 55. CreateSpace will print books on demand, and they'll print them one at a time for you. You don't have to keep a massive inventory. You don't have to keep a basement full of books or anything like that. And by the way, the price for one book is the same price as for 500 books. So don't keep a basement full of things. Kunaki.com. I've got a link to them as well. Kunaki will do beautiful 4-color silkscreen print-on-demand discs, video, audio, data, DVD, CD, Tyvek case, movie case, whatever, for $1 a unit. Paul, are you saying I could get a CD of the greatest hits of my show for $1 and sell it for $15 and keep the difference? Yeah, you can. And it's pretty interesting. And remember, yeah, digital is interesting, but they buy the disc, they get the disc. You know how it is, the opening up of the shrink wrap and maybe there's a card inside of it from you or that type of thing. POD, print on demand's interesting. Vistaprint's another one. Vistaprint is just really cheap things with your logos and that kind of stuff on them. And that's everything from t-shirts to keychain holders to that kind of thing. Interesting stuff. They're not the only ones. They're the ones that just came to me as I put together these show notes. Consider them, again, links in the show notes. So when does it make sense to sell your own stuff? It might make sense to sell your own stuff before you do anything else, before you sell ads, before you sell things. I don't want to go there. If you look at some of the biggest names, they're selling stuff, and they're selling that more than they're selling the ads. And, you have print on demand, you have e-commerce on demand, you have a lot of opportunities on demand, and it's something that you should think about. I mean, maybe it makes sense to start selling from day one. Now, a couple of thoughts there. Let them know that this is how you pay for the show. I believe in podcasting that I know there's an intimate relationship. I believe that there's sort of an unspoken contract. Tom Webster once said that if the product is free, the product is you. And you want to tell a podcaster straight up front, where the revenue comes from. And if because, if it comes from nowhere, then how long are they going to stay around? And yes, there's room for passion and there's all these things, but, we have to pay the bills. And, if you let your audience know, look, I'm paying the bills by selling t-shirts or by selling CDs or by selling ebooks or physical books or in Brian's case, lock picking kits. That's an interesting model. And some of your audience will come with you. Some of your audience will participate that way because they know and they like and they trust you. I learned from Brian Brushwood a couple of things. And again, take a look at his website. It's phenomenal. You got to teach them how to use them sometimes. If you're doing something more than a CD or a t-shirt, teach them how to use them. Brian does a great job of that. And also, everything I've said before in previous episodes, and we've got a lot of episodes of the podcast report here to go back to, I speak to a lot about evergreen content and the idea that something goes up forever. Well, now, if you've got an episode that sells a product and the product makes sense evergreen, that show stands for a long time as an ad for you. And as you get more popular and as you get more downloads and over time, if it's selling something that's still around, it starts to get really, really interesting. And the numbers start to get attractive. And, then the episode is no longer just something that's going to last them between now and the next episode, but then the episode becomes sort of a standalone sales vehicle for a product that you're selling and taking a look at. Couple things to think about more. Should you run an affiliate program? An affiliate program, most of you know what that term is, but for those of you who don't, it's online commission sales. Basically, if I have you, let's say I could have you sell my book. I could say, hey, if you sell, How to Podcast 2015 at your podcast site, I'll give you $5. I could still make a profit from that. I told you my book was $3. If I gave you $5, that's $8. There's still $7 in profit. Yeah, that's right. The numbers are there. An affiliate program, man, if you grab an e-commerce engine that has an affiliate program, then you've got the ability to have others marketing and selling your stuff for you. And man, how cool would that be if my How to Podcast book was sold to you by someone who knows me, but you didn't know me? I mean, think about the introduction there. Think about the phenomenal opportunity there. And, it's interesting. It's fascinating. As you look to e-commerce, definitely look to affiliates. Definitely find a system and something that runs that for you. Another thing to think about, what happens once you have their credit card? First of all, there's just the legalities of having their credit card, and there's the security issues of having their credit card. But once that's done, and once that's managed and get that, there's a follow-up opportunity in credit cards that's really interesting. But if I have your credit card on file, you can call my office and say, hey, I loved your book. I want to give 10 copies away for Christmas. And then I got your thing on file, and you don't have to worry about typing it out online, and you don't have to talk about doing these things again. The relationship that we begin to build is bigger, is better. And, if somebody wants to do a monthly reoccurring, either through a Patreon donation kind of thing, or maybe the CD of the Month Club or something like that, if you got their credit card on file, you can do that. Not all systems let you do that. If you do things like PayPal or some of the other systems out there, that don't give you the credit card, you don't have that opportunity. Think about that. Man, if you can take one sale and move it to 10, one sale and move it to 100, a system that makes these things possible becomes interesting. Reoccurring revenue plus having the credit card on file for upsells plus an affiliate program plus testing plus all these things. It starts to get really, really, really interesting. Another thing to think about. Nothing makes you more real than something physical. That's one of the reasons why I'm really excited about the podcast movement event. I'm going to get to meet a lot of you. Please come up and introduce yourself. Mention this episode. It'll be fun. But the fact of the matter is, when we see each other, shake hands, who knows, maybe hug, it becomes more real. If I hand you a physical CD of the show or a copy of my book or something like that, it becomes real. And it can be the same with you and your audience. Physical makes things feel more real. It makes things more real. When you get a physical piece of mail from somebody, it's much more exciting than getting an email from them or something like that. That. Nothing makes you more real than something physical. And then finally, just the last thought in this world is it's just a really interesting way to connect with your audience. If I'm just in your ear once a week, that's one thing. But if I'm being warned by you, that's something else. If I got a book that you're flipping through and underlining and marking up, that's something else. If I've got a CD that you're putting in your car, maybe giving to friends for Christmas, that's something else. It expands the relationship that we have as podcasters and is pretty exciting. So what am I going to do? Well, a couple things. Number one, I'm going to start selling the book here. Got a couple of things to fix up in line. A future episode. For those of you listening to this historically, you're already laughing because not only is he selling the book, but he's selling the 2016 version of the book and he's selling the 2017 version of the book. I'm going to definitely be selling the book here at thepodcastreport.com. I'm going to be selling a few other things. You'll be hearing about them soon. They should be fun, ways to connect, and I'll be able to share with you what worked, what didn't work, affiliate programs and couponing and that kind of stuff. Should be fun. What you can do, a couple of things. Take 3 minutes, piece of paper, pen, write down some things that you could sell to your audience and think outside of the box, not just t-shirts and keychains and tchotchkes and that type of thing, but what could you do? What could be different? What would separate you? The opportunity on that is pretty amazing. And boy, the numbers are better than an ad insert. And the relationship is so much smoother. And, it's just a different game. It's funny, if you sold somebody a ad insert in an episode and a year later that episode continues to be popular, I'll tell you this, you're not collecting the ad revenue, but if it sells a product, it keeps going. It's just interesting. So write down a few things that you could sell to your audience and then just spend 5 to 10 minutes. Would that change your monetization strategy? Would that change your production strategy? Just things to think about. Anyway, a longer episode than normal, but it's a topic near and dear to my heart that we're going to be exploring in future episodes. And now you have some ideas to play with. I hope you liked it. If you listened this far, obviously there was something there. I would love your social thoughts. Thepodcastreport.com/Twitter, thepodcastreport.com/Facebook for social. Please follow, like, make comments, tell the world, all that good stuff. The website's up. Feel free to comment away if there's something that just got you on this episode or a question or something you have. Again, thepodcastreport.com/55. Bunch of links for you in this episode. I got a link to the podcast book right now at Amazon. Who knows? Maybe I'll move that to me soon. The Patreon option that we spoke to, the Global Paradox, Scam Stuff, Create Space, Vistaprint. They're all there, and you can go out and check what we were chatting about. I would love a subscribe. I would love a longer-term relationship with you. If this is the first time you listened, you can head out to thepodcastreport.com/iTunes or /Stitcher or /Pocket Casts or /TuneIn or /Spreaker /iHeartRadio or /Overcast, whatever you choose. Please join us, follow us. Let me send you a new episode every week because we got a lot of things to do, a lot of things to accomplish. My email is thepodcastreport@outlook.com. If you want to leave a review, I'd love one at iTunes or Stitcher. Between now and next week, do sit down and write out, examine, think about, ponder, dream, a couple things you could sell at your own website, and examine, ponder, figure out how it might change what it is that you're doing and make your podcast better. This is Paul Colligan. This is the Podcast Report at thepodcastreport.com. We'll chat next week. Talk to you then. Bye.